Mr. Peterson grabbed her arm and knocked it down, and the gun fired 2 more times. In essence, Mr. Peterson never shot anybody.
The entire controversy surrounding the shooting case involving Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez has taken a dramatic new turn as fresh developments surface that are forcing people to question what they thought they knew. For years, many believed the story had already reached its final chapter. Back in August 2023, when the judge sentenced Tory Lanez to 10 years in prison for the 2020 shooting incident, it seemed like the legal system had spoken its final word. He was convicted on 3 felony counts, including assault with a semi-automatic firearm, and the courtroom moment felt definitive. The gavel came down, deputies escorted him away, and for most observers, the case appeared sealed in history. But behind the scenes, things never truly stopped moving. His legal team continued working quietly, filing appeals, reviewing documents, and searching for anything that might challenge the conviction. Months stretched into years, and during that time, new information slowly began surfacing, information that had never been presented during the original trial. What shocked many observers was where the biggest development came from. It didn't come from Tory's defense investigation. It came from Megan's own legal action. In March 2025, Megan filed a civil defamation lawsuit in Los Angeles Superior Court against a blogger she accused of spreading false claims about the shooting. During the discovery phase of that civil case, more than 200 pages of medical records from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center emerged.
She had the gun. She fired it 3 times. Mr. Peterson grabbed her arm and knocked it down, and the gun fired 2 more times.
In the months following the attack, Lanez incorporated the experience into his public messaging and creative output. From prison, he released a recorded track reflecting on survival, resilience, and what he described as systemic indifference. The song circulated widely online, drawing attention not only from fans but also from commentators who viewed it as part of a broader effort to reshape his narrative. Around the same time, a petition supporting clemency gathered tens of thousands of signatures and was delivered to state officials, demonstrating that his backing base remained active and organized. A major media moment arrived when he participated in a lengthy interview with NBC News, his first broadcast conversation since incarceration. Appearing in prison attire, he spoke calmly but emotionally, discussing the scars left by the stabbing and describing them as reminders of what he had endured. He repeated his claim that he had never harmed a woman and expressed regret over one decision in particular, choosing not to testify during his trial. That admission immediately sparked analysis from legal commentators, many of whom noted that defendants often face difficult strategic choices about whether taking the stand will help or hurt their case. The interview reignited a question that had lingered since the verdict: why he had remained silent when he had the chance to speak directly to jurors. Some analysts suggested he may have believed staying quiet would protect others involved in the situation. Others argued it was simply a legal gamble that didn't pay off. Whatever the reason, the choice had become one of the most debated decisions connected to the entire trial. By this point, the case had grown far beyond the courtroom where the verdict was delivered. It had become a layered story involving legal appeals, witness controversies, prison violence, public campaigns, and competing narratives about truth and accountability. And as new developments continued to surface, it was clear that the final chapter had not yet been written.
Where I take issue is if you're asking for Tory to be held accountable, and for those people that meant prison, you can't then be cheering that he gets stabbed in prison.
DNA and forensic results remained in a gray zone. While some partial matches implicated Lanez, the data was not definitive enough to confirm guilt beyond all doubt. Lanez supporters argued that ambiguous forensic evidence combined with evolving witness statements created grounds for reasonable doubt, while prosecutors emphasized that combined elements, GSR, trajectory mapping, and ballistics, were sufficient for a conviction. Independent reviews, including one conducted by the Innocence Project in 2025, did not find methodological errors in forensic handling. Debates over interpretation persisted, but the chain of custody was upheld, with over 1,200 documented entries spanning 5 years. Every appellate court ruling had reinforced the validity of evidence handling, cementing the case's technical credibility even as public opinion remained sharply divided.
For example, there were 3 potential suspects in the car that night, and yet the only DNA sample was taken of Mr. Peterson.
As the debate intensified, attention shifted toward questions that critics of the verdict had been raising for years. One of the loudest centered on forensic testing, specifically why, out of everyone present in the vehicle that night, only Tory Lanez was swabbed for DNA in a way that became central to the prosecution's argument. Supporters questioning the investigation pointed out that there were 4 people inside the SUV when the gunfire occurred, yet the spotlight seemed to fall primarily on one individual. They argued that if a firearm was handled by multiple people, then testing all possible handlers could have painted a fuller picture. The presence of unknown DNA on the weapon added another layer of discussion, fueling speculation about whether all investigative avenues had truly been exhausted. Still, it's crucial to separate verified facts from claims circulating publicly. The statement attributed to Bradley James remained just that, a statement. It had not been entered into court evidence, had not been evaluated under oath, and had not been tested through cross-examination. In legal terms, that distinction is enormous. Courts rely on sworn testimony and documented proof, not unsworn allegations, no matter how compelling they may sound outside a courtroom. In fact, Lanez's legal team had previously attempted to obtain an affidavit from Kelsey Harris that might support claims similar to the ones circulating. But no such sworn document ever materialized. Appellate judges reviewing the case had already addressed disputes about witness credibility during earlier proceedings, ultimately concluding that the inconsistencies and memory gaps presented during testimony fell within the realm of trial dynamics rather than evidence of coercion or misconduct. That ruling reinforced the standing conviction, even as public debate continued. Despite those legal realities, James's remarks still resonated strongly in public spaces, especially among people who had been following the case closely since 2020. To them, his claims revived a question that had lingered from the very beginning: what if the widely accepted version of events wasn't the complete story? That single possibility was enough to reignite speculation, theories, and heated arguments across social media platforms. Understanding why his comments struck such a nerve requires looking closely at Harris's role in the saga and how her account evolved over time. She wasn't just another witness passing through the narrative. She had once been considered part of Megan Thee Stallion's inner circle, a longtime friend and trusted presence who had been inside the vehicle during the incident. That alone made her perspective uniquely significant. Her shifting statements over the years, moving from certainty to silence and then to partial reaffirmation, would become one of the most dissected elements of the entire case, and one of the biggest reasons the controversy never truly faded from public attention.
This statement aligns with the statement of the only non-party witness to the case, Mr. Sean Kelly.
Meanwhile, the clemency campaign surrounding Lanez had gained momentum. In May 2025, Anna Paulina Luna sent a formal letter to Gavin Newsom, recommending that Lanez be considered for clemency. This letter, co-signed by several other members of the House of Representatives, argued that procedural missteps and inconsistencies in witness accounts, particularly regarding Harris's shifting testimony and previously undisclosed medical records, created circumstances warranting mercy. The letter framed Lanez's conviction within the broader context of systemic challenges faced by young Black men in high-profile entertainment positions. It highlighted his educational accomplishments while incarcerated, including earning a high school equivalency diploma by 2024, and emphasized his rehabilitation efforts. Newsom's office acknowledged the submission, sending it to the Board of Parole Hearings for review. Despite these efforts, the reality of clemency law is stark. Governors rarely grant pardons without significant legal precedent or appellate intervention. Historically, firearm-related commutations in California are exceptionally rare, with only a handful granted over the last decade. Nevertheless, the clemency push kept Lanez in the public eye and reinforced narratives of resilience and systemic struggle.
If you look at the steps that it took, remember Kelsey asked for immunity. That should have said something.
Confirmed reports later clarified that after the assault, Lanez was transported to a medical facility where surgeons worked for hours to repair the damage. Doctors treated torn muscle tissue, internal bleeding, and complications linked to a partially collapsed lung. He remained hospitalized for more than a week before being discharged back into custody, beginning what was described as a long and physically demanding recovery process. Rehabilitation extended for months, as mobility issues and lingering pain reportedly required ongoing therapy. Following the attack, prison officials transferred him roughly 150 miles north to California Men's Colony, placing him in a restricted housing unit under heightened monitoring. Sources indicated he was housed alone, with surveillance cameras running continuously and daily mental health evaluations added to his routine. His outdoor access was limited to short, controlled periods in isolated areas separated from other inmates. The measures reflected officials' assessment that his public profile created heightened security risks. Legal action soon followed. His attorney filed a civil claim alleging negligence, arguing that authorities had prior warnings about potential threats yet failed to take sufficient preventative steps. Documents connected to that claim reference internal communications that allegedly mentioned concerns about his safety weeks before the attack. Correctional officials responded by seeking dismissal of the case, citing legal protections that often shield government agencies from liability. As of early 2026, that civil dispute remained unresolved. The stabbing incident also delayed progress on his appeal, pushing legal timelines back while he recovered and access to legal visits was temporarily restricted. Yet, paradoxically, the attack also strengthened his public narrative. Supporters framed him as someone enduring hardship beyond his sentence, while critics argued the incident should not distract from the original conviction. Either way, the event reshaped public perception. The case was no longer discussed only in terms of testimony and evidence. It was now tied to a dramatic survival story that added another emotional layer to an already complex saga.
Mr. James informed Unite the People that he was witness to the conversation Ms. Harris had where she stated,
Further speculation even included high-profile possibilities, such as whether a presidential pardon could come into play. Some online commentators suggested that former President Donald Trump might intervene. However, legal experts quickly clarified that Lanez's case was a state-level matter, not federal, making a presidential pardon irrelevant in this situation. Despite these clarifications, the mere discussion of such a possibility illustrated the intense public fascination with Lanez's case. It underscored how celebrity, politics, and legal outcomes intersected in ways that extended far beyond the courtroom. The conversation had evolved into a multi-layered narrative where facts, speculation, and cultural commentary collided, creating a story that was as much about perception and media as it was about law and evidence.
Mr. James informed us he was not under a non-disclosure agreement or a confidentiality agreement.
The question that had haunted observers for years was simple but weighty. Why didn't Tory Lanez take the stand during his trial? Analysts and legal experts dissected this decision relentlessly after his interview with NBC News, arguing that it may have been a calculated choice rather than a lapse. According to Lanez, the strategy behind staying silent may have been connected to protecting others involved, particularly Kelsey Harris, who had complicated the narrative with her shifting statements. Experts noted that testifying can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gives defendants the opportunity to directly present their version of events to the jury. On the other, it exposes them to intense cross-examination that can amplify vulnerabilities. Lanez admitted in the interview that he believed the truth involved a struggle over the firearm, not an intentional shooting directed at Megan Thee Stallion. That statement, though subtle, suggested he viewed his silence as a way to preserve the broader story of what he believed actually happened. The public reaction to this reasoning was mixed. Supporters saw it as evidence of his integrity, a calculated effort to protect witnesses, and the narrative he believed was accurate. Critics interpreted it as a missed opportunity, the moment when he could have clarified or even changed perceptions in court. Regardless, the choice fed into the ongoing discussion of strategy versus truth, raising questions about how decisions made inside a courtroom ripple outward into public discourse for years afterward. Legal analysts also pointed out that this kind of strategic silence is not unusual in high-profile cases. Defendants often weigh the potential consequences of answering questions under oath, especially when witnesses have inconsistent or evolving statements. Lanez's choice, then, was consistent with the kind of risk assessment experienced by many defendants, though the celebrity element amplified public attention and criticism.
Why she asked for that
Not
in
only
the
did
beginning?
she ask for immunity, then got on the stand and said, I don't remember anything.
Despite online chatter, the foundation of the case remained intact. The physical evidence and forensic analysis from the trial had held up under appellate scrutiny. The gun recovered from the SUV, a black Taurus PT 738 TCP, was catalogued as Exhibit Number 47, and ballistics testing linked discharged casings to the weapon. DNA analysis produced ambiguous but notable results, with partial matches including Lanez, but not Megan or Harris, a fact his defense frequently highlighted to question contamination or procedural integrity. Experts also noted that gunshot residue, GSR, testing found 12 antimony lead particles on Lanez's right palm, surpassing thresholds indicating recent firearm discharge. Megan and Harris tested clean, a detail that became a critical talking point for supporters of Lanez who argued the evidence did not conclusively prove intent or direct action. The forensic backbone of the case, despite public speculation, social theories, and media narratives, had remained remarkably consistent, reinforcing the conviction in courts while fueling ongoing cultural debates.
Lanez declined to testify during his 2022 trial.
Do you regret not taking the stand?
I think if I would have taken the stand, the verdict would have definitely been very different.
In that same NBC interview, Lanez was asked directly about Megan Thee Stallion, whether he harbored resentment, anger, or a desire for confrontation. His response was measured and pointed. He claimed he carried no hatred and that any conversation with her would ideally happen face-to-face. That answer surprised some observers, as it suggested a level of emotional restraint and maturity inconsistent with the image of a defendant accused of violent behavior. Commentators immediately noted the tension inherent in this position. On one hand, expressing forgiveness or neutrality could be seen as a genuine attempt to demonstrate remorse or personal growth. On the other, in the eyes of a courtroom or appellate observer, it might come across as strategic positioning, carefully framing oneself as the morally superior party while maintaining claims of innocence. Lanez's public demeanor, the scars from the May 2025 prison attack visible on his forearm, and the calm tone of his voice created a powerful visual narrative. Academics who analyzed the interview suggested that Lanez was subtly shaping public perception, blending narrative control with authenticity. His measured responses, especially regarding Megan, positioned him as someone aware of the optics of public opinion. The effect on social media was immediate. Threads exploded with debate, some praising his composure and others questioning whether a person maintaining innocence could genuinely claim forgiveness for someone he allegedly tried to harm.
Currently, you're convicted of shooting her. You answering a question about if you forgive her?
During this period, the intersection of music, politics, and celebrity further complicated the public conversation. Some individuals on social media highlighted the seeming irony of politicians publicly supporting Lanez while simultaneously celebrating Megan Thee Stallion's work. Posts surfaced depicting scenarios where Lanez supporters argued for justice and clemency, while political figures highlighted the music of the victim, raising debates over loyalty, morality, and the influence of celebrity culture in political discussions. These discussions were amplified across platforms like Twitter, now X, Instagram, and YouTube, where public personalities dissected every angle. The narrative was no longer confined to the courtroom or the prison. It became a cultural debate encompassing justice, fame, and media influence.
And they're gonna say, this is bugging. What do you mean if you forgive her when we convicted you of shooting her?
The story took yet another turn in 2025 when Kelsey Harris re-entered the legal spotlight in a way that rain-led debate across both legal and public arenas. On July 8th of that year, she submitted a sworn declaration connected to a civil harassment dispute involving Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez. In that filing, she returned to pointing responsibility toward Lanez, but this time her wording was noticeably more restrained and cautious than it had been in earlier statements. Rather than repeating earlier direct accusations in vivid detail, she framed her claims in broader language and explained that fear had played a major role in how she handled previous testimony. According to the document, Harris said she had felt intimidated and emotionally overwhelmed during earlier proceedings, which she claimed affected how openly she spoke. She described lingering anxiety, emotional strain, and therapy sessions she said she attended afterward. The filing also mentioned alleged threats she believed were directed toward her, which she suggested contributed to her hesitation in court. Those details immediately drew attention because they offered a possible explanation for why her courtroom demeanor had seemed so guarded during the trial. Observers quickly noticed the contrast between her three major phases of public statements. In 2020, shortly after the incident, she had spoken clearly and directly. In 2022, when she appeared on the witness stand, she repeatedly declined to answer questions. Then in 2025, she offered a written declaration that pointed blame again, but without the same blunt certainty as before. That progression, certainty, silence, then cautious reaffirmation, became one of the most analyzed timelines in discussions about the case. By early 2026, Harris had largely withdrawn from public view, reportedly living quietly in Atlanta and focusing on freelance styling work while avoiding media attention. She hadn't taken part in additional legal proceedings, and no new testimony from her had been introduced in court. Still, her shifting narrative remained a central talking point in appellate briefs, commentary channels, and legal analysis threads. Courts reviewing the matter ultimately concluded that the differences in her statements reflected trial strategy and witness dynamics rather than proof of coercion. But outside the courtroom, interpretations varied widely. To some observers, her evolving account raised questions. To others, it showed the complicated emotional reality of someone caught in a high-pressure legal storm.
I'm pretty sure Jay-Z had nothing to do with that, my guy. Like, Jay-Z was at home when Megan got shot in the foot. Like,
Megan is under Rock Nation.
Online conspiracies around the case continued to explode across social platforms. Users speculated that Rock Nation, the label managing Megan Thee Stallion since 2019, might have influenced the legal process. Some theories suggested that prominent figures, including Jay-Z, could have orchestrated aspects of the trial to protect Megan's interests. Allegations ranged from claims of jury influence to bribing court officials or controlling evidence. While dramatic, none of these theories held up in court. Despite their popularity online, every claim remained unverified. Legal experts noted that without substantiated proof, such conspiracy theories served more as social commentary than actionable legal challenges. Still, the speculation fueled endless debate on YouTube, Twitter, X, and Instagram, keeping Lanez's story alive in public consciousness and amplifying perceptions of injustice or bias.
Now, the inconclusive thing that he talks about, which is when there were these reports that were released that Tory Lanez DNA was not found on the gun that shot Meg Thee Stallion.
According to Bradley James, the version of events the public had heard for years was fundamentally wrong. He claimed that Tory Lanez never fired the weapon at all, not once, not accidentally, not deliberately. In his account, Tory never pulled the trigger, never aimed the gun, and never intended for any shot to go off. Instead, James alleged that the gun was actually in the hands of Kelsey Harris, and that she was the one who discharged it. According to what he said he had been told, the situation escalated quickly, emotions ran high, and in the chaos, Harris allegedly fired the weapon herself. James further claimed that Tory's only physical involvement came afterward, when he supposedly tried to intervene. In his telling, Tory grabbed Harris's arm in an attempt to stop her, and during that struggle the gun went off again. That detail, the idea of a physical tussle causing additional shots, became one of the most talked about elements of his statement, because it presented a dramatically different interpretation of how the gunfire unfolded that night. Supporters who already doubted the prosecution's narrative immediately pointed out what they believed was a striking overlap between James's claims and earlier courtroom testimony from Sean Kelly, a bystander who had testified during the trial. Kelly had described seeing two women fighting while two men tried to separate them, and he said the flashes he observed appeared to come from the passenger side area of the vehicle. That detail caught attention because Harris had been seated on that side. For those skeptical of the verdict, the similarity between Kelly's account and James's later claims felt significant, almost like two separate puzzle pieces appearing to fit together. However, critics quickly pointed out an important distinction. Kelly's testimony was given under oath in court and tested through cross-examination, while James's statement had not been formally introduced as evidence in any legal proceeding. That difference mattered greatly in legal terms. Statements outside court can influence public opinion, but they don't automatically carry legal weight unless they're submitted, verified, and scrutinized through the judicial process. Still, the effect on public conversation was immediate. Online discussions surged again, timelines filled with side-by-side comparisons of testimonies, and commentators began revisiting details from the trial that many people hadn't thought about in years. For some observers, James's version sounded like a missing explanation. For others, it sounded like speculation layered onto an already complex case. What couldn't be denied was this: his claims didn't close the debate, they reopened it, wider than before.
Gavin Newsom is not going to pardon Tory Lanez. Why?
GSR testing and ballistics data became key elements in framing Lanez's guilt in court. While partial DNA matches left room for interpretation, the antimony lead particle count suggested he had handled the firearm recently. For discharged casings matched the gun's barrel pattern, and fragments recovered from Megan's feet indicated low-velocity rounds fired from a distance of 2 to 4 feet. Independent biomechanical analysis mapped trajectory and impact patterns to the front passenger seat where Lanez had been positioned, forming a coherent narrative for the jury. Defense teams attempted to challenge next-generation DNA sequencing requests and raised procedural concerns about custody gaps. However, judges consistently ruled that the original forensic analysis was thorough. Even when external reviews flagged minor procedural gaps, no breach of evidence integrity was found. These technical findings underscored that while public discussion often focused on speculation, the court relied on meticulous forensic work to uphold the conviction.
Tory was stabbed 14 times, including 7 wounds to his back, 4 to his torso, 2 to the back of his head.
That moment, the point when questions about Kelsey Harris and her legal decision surfaced, became a major turning point in how many observers interpreted the entire situation. For people closely following the case involving Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion, it stood out as a detail that didn't just raise eyebrows, it set off alarms. The issue wasn't simply what she said or didn't say. It was the legal steps she took before speaking at all, requesting immunity. In legal contexts, immunity is not a casual request. It's typically sought when a witness believes their testimony could potentially expose them to criminal liability. That's why, when news spread that Harris had pursued an immunity agreement before taking the stand, many commentators immediately started asking questions. The reasoning was straightforward and widely discussed. If someone has no involvement in wrongdoing, why would they feel the need for legal protection before testifying? To skeptics, that move suggested there might be more beneath the surface than the public had been told. Of course, legal experts pointed out that seeking immunity doesn't automatically imply guilt. Attorneys often advise witnesses to secure protection simply to avoid legal risk, especially in complicated cases involving multiple people, conflicting accounts, and high-profile scrutiny. From that perspective, the request could be viewed as a precaution rather than a confession. Still, in the court of public opinion, nuance often gets lost, and the optics of the situation carried enormous weight. For supporters of Lanez, the immunity request became one of the most cited talking points when arguing that the case deserved another look. They saw it as a potential red flag, not definitive proof of anything, but enough to justify deeper examination. Critics, on the other hand, dismissed that interpretation, emphasizing that speculation isn't evidence and that the jury had already considered the testimony presented during trial before reaching a verdict.
To the left side of his face. Both of his lungs collapsed, and he was placed on a breathing apparatus.
Through all this, life continued for both sides. Megan remained productive, releasing her 2022 album Traumazine, which debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200, demonstrating how she had navigated her career despite ongoing legal distractions. Lanez, despite incarceration, continued producing music through his Lost Tape series from 2023 to 2025, keeping his creative voice alive. As of early 2026, the case stood as a multi-layered narrative encompassing high-profile trials, witness inconsistencies, forensic debates, prison violence, clemency efforts, online conspiracies, and cultural commentary. For the public, it wasn't just a criminal trial, it was a living story about perception, power, survival, and the blurred lines between justice and narrative in a world captivated by celebrity, media, and social influence. The legal facts, the personal struggles, and the cultural ramifications intertwined into one of the most dissected cases of the decade, showing that the conversation was far from over.